that forgot that they're supposed to pull on the rope. They forgot that they're supposed to pull on the rope. And that's not just states' rights. It's not, I'm mad as hell and so I'm going to pull on the rope. It's their constitutional duty. It's the constitutional duty. And unfortunately, we get states that say, I'm so busy with so many other things, I don't have time to pull on the rope. I forgot how to pull on the rope. I'm afraid that big guy over there pulling on the other end of the rope will get mad if I pull on this rope. Worse yet, the big guy's paying me not to pull on the rope. And so one by one, they drop the rope, and the big guy on the other side of the tug-of-war pulls the rope over until it's all at his feet. Our liberty, our property, our self-government are all at the feet of one of the partners in the governing partnership. What federalism is about, that is the ingenious design of our system. It's not Republicans and Democrats. It's not liberals and conservatives. It's the very structure of our system. We have to pull. We have to pull always. We don't have to pull hard. There's 50 of us. But we have to pull always. We have to pull together. That's what federalism is all about. Are we ready to go here? We're still not ready to go. Here we go. Now we're up a little bit. Now we're talking. Look at that. Technology. Constitutional equality of the states is essential. It's essential to the way our nation is formed. So I want this side of the room over here, okay? Imagine that you live in your home. And you love your home. You love where you live. You don't want to live anywhere else. But your city comes out with a new order. And the city says, we're going to lock up half your house. You can only use half your house. Now, in the half of the house that you can't use is your kitchen. And in the half of your house that you can't use is the shutoff to the gas and the power and the water. Right? So imagine that you get fire, you get emergency. How are you feeling right now? Over here. Not so good. Now, that's going to have an impact on your life, isn't it? Now, what about, now over here, imagine over here, you're the neighbors. You're the neighbors. Is the fact that they can't shut off the gas if there's a fire, might that affect you? Now, also imagine that you pay to feed them because they can't get to their kitchen. And you also pay to fix the damage to their house if it burns, even though they're not allowed to prevent their house from burning down. And you got to pay for your own house. Now, the other thing you got to suppose is anytime the city wants to put out some new order and grow, they're going to go along with it because they got to keep getting that subsidy for their food. You with me? How's that sounding to y'all? Constitutional equality of the states is essential to the harmonious operation of the republic. This is the Supreme Court 2 years ago. They brought forward a 150-year line of cases. They said our nation was and is a union of states. I would like to encourage you to use that word more frequently. Instead of United States, so United States is fine, but it's a union of states. Our nation was and is a union of states equal in power, dignity, and authority. The constitutional equality of the states is essential to the harmonious operation of the republic. We're going to chat about that a little bit here. Freeing up these lands is the only solution big enough. It is a solution big enough, and it is the only solution big enough. Energy independence, economic independence, environmental stewardship of our lands. It's the only solution big enough for the entire nation. For the security of our nation, it is the only solution big enough. Now, I came to this kind of a strange way. I started my family in Japan. I was working for the mayor of the city of Osaka. I was in the International Relations Department. Had my first child in Japan. I care about my children deeply. When I started in the mayor's office, I show you that picture just because I'll never be able to do that again in my lifetime. When I started in the mayor's office in the city of Osaka, second week on the job, they said, Ken, we're glad to have you here, most important bilateral relationship in the world, but just so you know, we're looking to China. Now, this is in the mid to late 80s. We're looking to China because you've already broken the basic law of economics. Basic law of economics says you produce more than you consume. You invest the difference in additional production capacity. You're already deficit spending. We know history tells us you're on your way out, so we're looking to China. Ticked me off. Just ticked me off. I was 1-2 classes away from an economics double major anyway, just poured into international political economy for the next 30 years. Came to realize we're not going to pay off our debt. I ran for office because of my kids and because of this debt situation. At the time, it was only $3 trillion debt. Weren't those the days? Right? It was a $3 trillion debt. When I got into office, I realized I kept asking the question, how dependent are we on federal funds? No one could tell me. We think we're this and we think it's this, and I would ask specific departments and they didn't know. So my first session, I passed a bill that said we've got to know how dependent we are, department by department, what our contingency plans are if federal funds go away. Came to realize that we're 30% in Utah. Almost every state is 30 to 50% dependent on a federal government that tells us it's unsustainable for 30 to 50% of our state budget. Most states, it's the single largest line item of their state revenue, and there's no contingency plan. Imagine in your business, your largest customer makes up 30 to 50% of your revenue. You know they're going broke. They're already bouncing checks to the payday loan company, and you go to your partners and say, let's keep doing what we're doing. What could go wrong with that? So in a state, we also realize that in education, we're $2.5 billion below average in per pupil funding. There is no amount of tweaking the tax code that will solve that problem. And so we started looking at this as the only solution big enough. And we came across unanimous Supreme Court cases as late as 2009 that said Congress doesn't have the authority to change the uniquely sovereign character of our statehood agreement. And we began to realize that Congress is nothing more than a trustee of these lands from the very time that you as original states founded the nation and created that trust. We'll talk about that as we go. So, we all want healthy air. We all want healthy water and healthy wildlife, right? We all want safe and vibrant communities. We all want abundant recreation, right? We've been told that in order to get this, we have to have bureaucrats thousands of miles away manage our lands like a museum. You know what's in a museum, right? Dusty and dead stuff. We've been told we have to manage our lands like they're in a museum. Hands off, don't touch. That's what we've been told. How's that working out for us? Our lands being managed like they're in a museum. This year alone, 10 million acres of forested lands are going to go up in smoke. With it, millions of animals. Watersheds will be destroyed for decades. Communities are depressed. Police departments are in many cases not even funded. And recreation areas are burned and blocked. It's not working. The solution is the problem. We've got to free the lands so we get back to where the gardener gardens the land. Those, you know the gardens, right? Who better to manage a garden than the person that knows the soil, knows the climate, knows the conditions, knows the pests, is right there if anything happens to the land, whose livelihood and life depends upon the long-term stewardship of the garden. Who better to manage Utah's lands than Utahns? Montana's lands than Montana, rather than bureaucrats that are unelected thousands of miles away who do museum management. This is what we're talking about. So you can see that over the last 10 years, we've gone from 10 billion board feet harvested down to less than 2. That's even lower now. And we're up to, what are we at? That's 8 million acres burned. This year it's going to be up to 10. We're harvesting less, we're burning more. We're managing the forest for maximum combustion. This is going to be off the charts this year. We can't even measure it. And so with the fires come smoke. We've been in Salt Lake. We've been eating the smoke from Oregon and Washington all summer. You can't even see the mountains on either side of the freeway. Now, after the fires, of course, you're not done with the fire alone, because after the fire, then you get the floods. Because there's nothing to hold the water back, and that's the sponge that holds the water for the second most arid state in the nation. 77% of our watershed is one spark away from being gone. This University of California Merced scientist 2 months ago, in drought-stricken California, if they just managed the Sierra Nevadas to the sustainable tree density, 50 to 100 trees per acre instead of 500 to 1,000. If they just managed the Sierra Nevadas to the sustainable tree density, they would conserve way more than 250 billion gallons of water a year. And they would have a healthy forest, and they could fund education and public safety. Northern Idaho, catastrophic wildfire because of the fuel loads that are built up. Cinder Bear, they called her. Struggling through the catastrophic fire to find her way out, burned up to her elbows, luckily finds a spot that's not an inferno, huddles under a trailer, they find her, and they nurse her back to health. She's the lucky one. They nurse her back to health just to be released into another overgrown forest. Millions of animals a year are not so lucky. This woman in Oregon, single woman at home. In her home, someone's beating on her door. Naturally, she calls 911. 911 responds, "I'm sorry, the sheriff only operates between 9 and 5. We don't have the budget. Can you ask him to go away?" True story. "Can you call back tomorrow?" The woman was raped and brutalized. I stayed in Sheriff Gilbertson's home in Josephine County, Oregon. Sheriff Gilbertson, on his sheriff's patch, has a logging truck. Josephine County has some of the most productive forests in the nation. They've been shut off by museum management, by bureaucrats thousands of miles away. Their forest that was their asset, that protected that woman in her home, is now a liability managed for maximum combustion. It doesn't have to be this way. In Montana, just this year, Montana has some of the best firefighting teams in the nation. They equip their helicopters so they can carry more water, they can carry it faster. On average, the vast majority of fires in Montana are put out at 10 acres. As the fires were raging off the federal lands, the Montana crews, 5 of them were ready to mobilize and do what they do best. And the Forest Service said, "You can't mobilize. Your helicopters are not on our approved list." And so they sat and watched thousands of acres burn, millions of animals burn, watershed destroyed for decades, and air polluting their state for weeks. You can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. It takes a bureaucrat to actually put this stuff forward. 2 years ago, 2 years ago, in the budget discussions, they said, "Let's make it hurt." And so they shut down a multi-billion-dollar industry. In the state of Utah alone, it's $10 billion. Overnight, they shut down the national parks. They actually barricaded the roads for miles back. For Mount Rushmore, they barricaded the roads miles back so you couldn't even see a glimpse of it from the road. This is what museum management is like. Hands off, don't touch. Unfortunately, no. This is bureaucratic central government run amok. So, this is the Government Accountability Office 3 years ago now. In Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming, there is more recoverable oil in those 3 states than the rest of the world combined, locked up in federally controlled lands in this museum management. What sane nation in the world would put its energy policy in the hands of foreign powers when you have the assets sitting right there? 60 Minutes, about 4 months ago now, 60 Minutes said modern life's technology is in the grips of China. All of this computer technology, renewable energy technology, and our military technology. We can't put a fighter jet in the air, we can't put a battleship on the water, a submarine under the water, without rare earth minerals, and China controls about 90% of the world market of rare earth minerals. And we have rare earth minerals locked up in abundance from New Mexico to Alaska. What rational nation in the world puts its national security in the hands of its adversaries? It doesn't have to be this way. There is a solution big enough.
Croc TV.